Hey guys, in this video, I want to show you how to do the HackerRank dynamic array challenge. So we're going to go through and implement this function. And the first step is to read the instructions and understand the different parts of the instructions here. So we have sort of this just general overview of the problem. Then we have the function description. We have what that function returns. We have the input format, the constraints, and then the sample input, sample output, and then some explanation, just to kind of see how the function would work. And it's good to actually start, with these problems by just taking a look at the sample output. So you can see there's this sample output of 7 and 3, and here's the input, right? So we're going to take these two parts, and we're going to understand what this function needs to look like. So the first step is to declare a two-dimensional array of n empty arrays. And what this basically means is that you're going to have a two-dimensional array named ARR. And that's going to consist of n empty arrays. So in ARR, we're going to have different empty arrays by the scale of n. So we're going to have however many n is, however that's defined. We're going to create those arrays within an array. So it's going to be two-dimensional. Then we're going to declare the integer last answer to 0. We're then going to look at two types of queries. So there's two different types of queries that are going to be passed, given as an array of strings to parse, right? So each of these strings that's going to get passed in the standard in, we're going to have to parse this and read it as a query. And so what that is that there's type 1 and type 2. That's the first character in this string. So if it's type 1, we're going to run this query, which is looking at x, which is here, and it's going to do a bitwise XOR operation, which basically does the OR operation by the last answer over modulo over n, which is basically going to produce our index. So this index that gets produced is then going to be passed into the array to get access to the specific array within that two-dimensional array, where we can then append the integer y, which is that last character in this query. So we're going to basically take the query take the character y and append that to the one of the arrays within this two-dimensional array by the index of what's produced here. The next query is the same type of logic to get the index. So we ultimately do some logic on this x to get the index, and then within that two-dimensional array, within that particular array index, in that array, we're going to get the value, assign the value that we pull from the query, the character y modulo the size of the dimension that we just pulled. So we have this array within the array that we're getting the size of, and then we're going to create a index to access the value within that array within the array. And then we're going to assign that value to last answer. And then we're going to store the new value of last answers into a new answers array. So we're just going to push that onto a stack that we're going to return at the end. So you can see here, the symbol that this is called a bitwise OR. You can read more about that. It's basically this @ character, or this upper caret character operator within the code that's going to do this bitwise XOR operation. Now you can learn more about that on Wikipedia. The modulo operator, also a bit of math in there, which is going to produce this number. And then the size of the array is just looking at the length of the array in terms of size. So that's just going to be a dot length property. Now we can complete this function by having the two following parameters. So there's the number of empty arrays to initialize. We looked at that. And then these query strings with the 3 space separated integers. So that's the description, just to read it again. Then the results are going to be integer the results of each type of toQuery in order they are presented. So we're going to basically return the results of each type 2 query in the order that they're presented. Now this is actually not very clear, but what this means is this is an array of integers. So it's not actually just an integer. And the first line contains the two separated integers here, which is n and 5. So this is n is the size of the array, and then the array to create and then the queries that are there. So the number of queries is 5. So here's 5 queries. And so then the output it should be 7 and 3. All right, so let's go ahead and implement this function. So dynamic array, the first thing we want to do is we want to create a array that we can build based on this n value. So we're going to do a quick for loop that's going to take n, and it's going to scale the this array object by the value of n. So you can see we're just creating new arrays within this array at each of those index, and that's going to be our array. Okay, and then for the queries, we're just going to do a for let q of queries, and this is going to be each of these queries as a string. And since we have two types of queries here, the 1 and the 2, we're going to actually check, if this first value is a 1, then we're going to, in this case, run query 1. Okay, and I haven't implemented that yet, but we're going to run query 1. And what we're going to do is pass in x and y, which are the two values after the 1 in this line of query, right? So we're going to pass in x and y. But if query 0 is 2, then we're going to run query 2, and we're going to also pass in 1 and q2, which is going to be x and y. Okay, and then at the other thing we can do in this case is we can initialize up here. I forgot to do last answer, and that was going to be initialized to 0. And then we're also going to have an answers array, which is going to be at the end what we return. It's going to be the answers that we get, right? So now we can implement these two functions. Query 1, which takes an x and y, right? And what we're going to do here is we're going to, in this case, it says get the index for query 1. Right, so we're going to get the index equals, say, let I equal get index of x, because we're going to pass in x. And then we're going to append that to the one of the arrays at that index. We're going to push on y, which is that value that we're appending to the array at that index. Now let's go ahead and write this function getIndex, which is going to be a function that takes in x, and it's going to return this logic here, which we saw was x bitwise XOR by the last answer, and then modulo n. Okay, so that's going to get us our index. Then we're going to do const query 2. And the cool thing about this, okay, is we're going to be able to use that function again because we've got it here, right? So we're going to let I equal get index x, and that's going to get us the value that we can utilize in this. And now we're going to assign the value of this array at I at a z value to last answer. And get a z value based on the index length, right? So the size of that index. And it's actually not going to be the size, it's going to be the y modulo that size. So we're going to create another variable called L equals the length. And we have y over L equals z. And then we're setting that last answer. And then we're going to push that last answer onto the answers array so that we get that built up over time. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this at the bottom here. And there we go. We have the 7 in output. Now let's go ahead and submit that. And it's going to pass all our test cases, and that is successful. So again, that is how you implement the dynamic array function. And this is one implementation that you can use. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, and happy coding.